The first thing he noticed was the silence inside the cockpit. Not the calm kind of silence, but the heavy, unfamiliar kind. It was late afternoon, somewhere in Germany, early 1944, and the massive aircraft sat still on the airfield like a creature that did not belong there.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
The engines were quiet for now, but the machine itself felt alive. A B-17 Flying Fortress, captured, repaired, and now waiting. The German pilot standing beside it had flown many aircraft before, fast ones, deadly ones, machines built for precision and speed. But this was different. This was American. This was large, and this was the aircraft he had spent months trying to destroy. Now he was about to fly it. You can almost feel the hesitation in that moment. The wind moved lightly across the airfield, carrying the faint smell of fuel and oil. The ground crew moved quietly around the bomber, their steps slower than usual, their eyes constantly returning to the aircraft as if they did not fully trust it. The pilot adjusted his gloves and looked up at the wide wings stretching out on both sides. It was not just the size that stood out, it was the confidence built into the design. This machine was not made to run, it was made to survive. The pilot's name was Hans-Werner Lerche, an Oberleutnant assigned to evaluate captured enemy aircraft for the Luftwaffe. He had flown Soviet aircraft. He had flown British designs. He understood how different nations thought about engineering war machines. But this aircraft, the B-17, carried a reputation even before he touched its controls. Reports had been coming in from missions over Schweinfurt and Regensburg. The aware American bombers had pushed deep into German airspace under intense attack and still completed their missions. Crews spoke of formations that refused to break, aircraft that kept flying even when damaged, and gunners who could turn the sky into a wall of fire. Lerche climbed the narrow ladder into the aircraft. The interior was tight, filled with wires, metal frames, oxygen lines, and instruments arranged in a way that felt unfamiliar to him. He paused for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. The cockpit was not elegant, it was practical. Everything had a purpose. Everything was built to keep the aircraft moving, even when damaged. He ran his hand across the controls, studying the layout. It felt different from the sleek German fighters, like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 he was used to. Less refined, perhaps, but also more forgiving. You can almost imagine what he was thinking. This is what we have been fighting? The engines were started one by one. 4 Wright Cyclone engines came to life with a deep, steady rumble. The sound was not sharp like a fighter's engine. It was heavier, more grounded. The entire aircraft vibrated as the power built up. Lerche felt it through the seat, through the controls, through his hands. This was not speed. This was strength. As the bomber began to roll forward, the ground crew stepped back, watching closely. Even they seemed unsure. A captured American bomber, now under German control, moving across a German airfield. It was a strange sight, almost unreal. Some of the mechanics had seen these aircraft only as distant targets, black silhouettes against high-altitude skies. Seeing one this close, intact, and under their control felt unnatural. The takeoff was the first real test. Lerche pushed the throttles forward, feeling the engines respond. The aircraft began to accelerate slowly at first, then steadily building speed. The runway stretched ahead, and for a moment it felt like the bomber might not lift at all. It was heavy, very heavy, but then, almost quietly, it did. The wheels left the ground, and the B-17 rose into the air. You can almost feel that moment. Not dramatic, not sudden, just steady. As the aircraft climbed, Lerche adjusted the controls, testing its response. It was not fast, not compared to the fighters he had flown, but it was stable, extremely stable. Even small inputs felt controlled, predictable. This was not a machine designed for sharp turns or quick escapes. This was a machine designed to hold its course. Yet he pushed it a little harder, testing its limits. Gentle turns, slight climbs. The aircraft responded with a calmness that surprised him. It did not fight him. It did not resist. It simply followed. That was the first thing that stayed with him. The sky above Germany had seen thousands of these bombers, especially during the combined bomber offensive. German pilots had approached them with confidence at first. They believed they could easily break through the formations, but over time, something changed. Reports came back describing heavy defensive fire, tight formations, and bombers protecting each other with interlocking gun coverage. He moved the aircraft into a wider turn, increasing the bank slightly. The controls remained steady. Even at this size, the B-17 did not feel clumsy. It felt balanced. That was unexpected. Then came the second realization. He imagined what it would feel like to attack this aircraft, to come in from behind, as many German pilots did, to line up a shot. But from this position, from inside the bomber, he could see the gun positions: nose guns, top turret, ball turret beneath the belly, tail guns watching the rear, waist gunners covering the sides. It was not just one gun, it was many, covering almost every approach. You can almost see it through his eyes. There is no easy way in. And that explained something German pilots had been reporting after encounters with American bombers, especially once long-range escorts like the P-51 Mustang began appearing deeper over Germany. Even before escorts arrived, the bombers themselves created a defensive wall. Approaching one meant exposing yourself to several others. The test continued. The Lerche increased altitude, pushing the aircraft higher into thinner air. The engines maintained their rhythm, steady and reliable. The controls remained responsive. There was no sign of weakness, no sudden instability. Everything about the aircraft felt dependable. That word stayed with him. Dependable. He tested engine response, reducing power on one engine slightly, then bringing it back. The aircraft adjusted without drama. Even with uneven power, it continued to fly straight with only minor correction. That was not something he was used to. In many aircraft, engine issues could quickly become dangerous. Here, it felt manageable. You can almost feel the shift in his thinking. This is not just a bomber. This is a system. He imagined a real mission. A formation of these aircraft crossing into Germany. An anti-aircraft fire rising from below. Explosions around them. Fighters approaching from multiple directions. And inside each bomber, a crew depending on the machine to hold together just a little longer. Just long enough to complete the mission and turn back. The B-17 made that possible. And there was something else he began to understand as the minutes passed in the air. The aircraft did not just rely on strength, it relied on cooperation. Every gunner, every crew member, every position had a role. The bombardier in the nose, the flight engineer managing systems, the radio operator maintaining contact, the waist gunners scanning the horizon. It was not one man flying a machine. It was a team operating a system designed for survival. As the flight continued, Lerche began to push the aircraft into more demanding conditions. His slightly sharper turns, changes in altitude. The bomber responded each time with the same calm behavior. It did not surprise him. It did not punish small mistakes. It allowed correction. That was something important, because in combat, perfection does not exist. He thought about the American crews who flew these machines. Young men, often with limited experience, sent deep into enemy territory, facing flak, facing fighters, facing everything Germany could throw at them. And yet, many of them returned. Now he understood why. The aircraft helped them. And it did more than that. It gave them confidence. A crew that believed in its aircraft could fly deeper, hold formation longer, and complete missions under conditions that might break less capable machines. He also realized something that German engineers had approached differently. The German aircraft often focused on performance, speed, climb rate, firepower. But here, in this American bomber, the focus was endurance, redundancy, the ability to take damage and keep flying. Even the placement of fuel tanks, the structure of the wings, and the separation of systems showed a design meant to survive hits. You can almost feel the quiet respect forming in his mind. Not admiration for the enemy, but recognition of effective design. The sun was beginning to lower as Lerche guided the B-17 back toward the airfield. The flight had not been dramatic. There were no sudden moments, no extreme maneuvers, but that was exactly the point. This aircraft was not designed for drama. It was designed to survive. The landing approach was steady. The bomber descended slowly, the runway coming into view. Lerche adjusted the controls carefully, feeling the weight of the aircraft respond. It was not difficult, just different, more deliberate, more controlled. The wheels touched down with a firm but stable impact. The aircraft rolled forward, slowing gradually until it came to a stop. The engines were shut down one by one, and the heavy rumble faded into silence. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Lerche removed his gloves and sat there, still inside the cockpit, looking out over the airfield. The same wind moved across the ground. The same crew waited nearby. But something had changed. He climbed down from the aircraft slowly. The ground crew approached, their faces curious. They wanted to know. Everyone wanted to know. What was it like? Lerche paused for a moment before speaking, not because he did not know what to say, but because he understood the weight of it. Though he had flown many aircraft, he had tested enemy designs, he had evaluated strengths and weaknesses. But this time, the answer was different. What he said next would stay with those who heard it, and it would spread. He did not speak with excitement. He did not speak with fear. He spoke with clarity. He explained that the aircraft was not exceptional in speed. It was not exceptional in maneuverability. It did not outperform German fighters in those areas. But that was not the point. The point was something else. He described the stability, the way the aircraft held its course, the way it responded to damage, the way it allowed the pilot to remain in control even when conditions were not ideal. He described the defensive positions, the overlapping fire, and the difficulty of approach. And then he said something that made everyone listening stop. He said that this aircraft was built in a way that made it very hard to destroy. Not impossible, but difficult, very difficult. You can almost feel the reaction in that moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet understanding, because that meant something important. It meant that every mission flown by these bombers was not just about numbers or strategy. It was about design, about engineering, about building a machine that could carry its crew through danger and still bring them back. Lerche's report would later reflect these observations in detail. He noted the forgiving flight characteristics, the ability to maintain control under stress, and the strong defensive layout. He also pointed out weaknesses. The aircraft was not agile, it was vulnerable without formation support. But its strengths outweighed those limits in the role it was built for. For German planners and pilots, this information mattered. It confirmed what many had already experienced in the air. These bombers were not easy targets. They required coordination, precision, and often significant risk to engage effectively. And that understanding would shape how Germany responded. New tactics were developed. Heavier weapons were introduced. Pilots were trained to attack in specific ways, often head-on to reduce exposure time. Because once you understood the B-17, you understood that careless attacks would not work. Some units began experimenting with concentrated forward attacks, closing distance quickly and firing heavy-caliber weapons before breaking away. Others focused on disrupting formations rather than destroying individual aircraft. Because the strength of the B-17 was not just in one machine, but in how they flew together. As night began to fall over the airfield, the captured B-17 sat quietly once again. But now it was no longer just an enemy machine. It was understood. And sometimes understanding changes everything. You can almost imagine the German fighters that would take off the next day, the pilots climbing into their cockpits, the engines roaring to life, the sky ahead filled with formations of American bombers. But now, somewhere in the back of their minds, there was a new awareness. They were not just attacking aircraft. They were attacking something built to endure. And that changed how you approached it. That changed how you fought it. Because once you understand your enemy, the battle is never the same again. And for Oberleutnant Lerche, that single flight had done something rare in war. It had replaced assumption with understanding. It had turned a distant target into something real, something complex, something carefully built, a machine that did not need to be fast to be dangerous, a machine that did not need to turn quickly to win, a machine that only needed to keep flying. And that, more than anything, was what stunned him the most.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.